Kenny Pickett may be the scariest prospect in the 2022 NFL Draft, but what is scarier about him? His good size and perfect arm to thrash defenses, or his little ladylike hands and inconsistent timing? Kenny Pickett grew up in Oakhurst, New Jersey, where he attended Ocean Township High School. During his time with the Spartans, Pickett passed for 4,670 yards and 43 touchdowns, adding 873 yards and 17 touchdowns on the ground. He was a three-star recruit, considered the 33rd best pro-style quarterback in the class and the 21st best prospect from New Jersey. Pickett originally committed to Temple before he decided to flip to Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett spent most of his true freshman season at Pittsburgh as a backup. He only got to start one game, a huge upset victory over number 2 Miami, ending the Hurricanes' potential perfect season. The following season, Pickett started and led the Panthers to their first ACC Coastal Division Championship, finishing 7-7 and throwing for just under 2,000 yards with 12 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Still a lot of improvement needed, and it took some time. As a redshirt sophomore and junior, he passed for 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in both seasons and never took that step to becoming a top collegiate quarterback until 2021. Pickett got an extra year of eligibility after the COVID-19 pandemic shortened the 2020 season, and he decided to run it back, a decision that he surely doesn't regret now. Suddenly, Pickett was a different quarterback. He broke out as one of the best players in the country, passing for 42 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, leading the Panthers to an ACC championship victory and finishing 3rd in Heisman voting. There are a lot of things to love about Kenny Pickett, like his perfect size, 6'3" and a bit bigger than your average quarterback. He can handle hits and is willing to with his competitive nature, and he's still athletic enough to make the occasional play with his legs. When he does get out of the pocket, Pickett can be dangerous and make a blitz pay. Pickett has a pretty strong arm, above average at least, and is accurate all over the field. He understands a lot of concepts and is willing to go to his check down, but sometimes he'll take the easy underneath route when the deep route is open. Pickett's also inconsistent throwing at times and often resorts to scrambling that results in a lot of unnecessary sacks. Of course, the biggest knock on Pickett, small hands at just 8.5 inches. I have actually met Kenny Pickett in person, and I couldn't tell you the difference, but he is a big dude. To make matters worse, usually a team doesn't want a 24-year-old rookie. The small hands definitely don't seem like a pressing issue, but they can be. There isn't a single quarterback in the league with 8.5-inch hands, and there hasn't been one to enter the league in the past 5 years. The last successful quarterback with 8.5-inch hands, Michael Vick. If you remember ahead of the 2020 NFL Draft, Joe Burrow was catching hell for his small hands, and his hands were still a half-inch bigger than Pickett's. His hand size certainly didn't matter much when the Bengals took him first overall, and he led them to a Super Bowl in year 2. A lot of the hand issue relates back to cold weather or rain and the difficulty gripping the ball, but there's a case to be made that it doesn't apply to Pickett. He's been in the cold his entire life, growing up in New Jersey and playing in Pittsburgh. The cold will be nothing new. Plus, he's worn gloves since high school, and that helps increase his grip anyways. I would argue that there's a lot more pressing issues than just the size of Kenny Pickett's hands. A 24-year-old rookie may scare off a lot of teams. Pickett's older than a handful of big names: Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Tua Tagovailoa, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, Davis Mills, and Mac Jones, among others. For a guy at 24, you'd hope he'd already be more polished and understood, because you don't really have as much time to wait for him to develop like you would with a Sam Howell, Carson Strong, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, or Matt Corral type of guy. Couple his age with what scouts probably do see as the biggest concern with Kenny Pickett. Is he a one-year wonder? He was average at best during his first 4 years in college, the normal amount of time that almost every single person gets, but because of COVID-19, he got one more opportunity. He was projected to be a day 3 selection at the 2021 NFL Draft, but thanks to his breakout extra year for the Panthers, Pickett's now a projected first-round selection 1 year later. There is the fear that Pickett could return to his previous form. It's possible, but it didn't happen to Joe Burrow. He was, for the most part, a below-average quarterback before his final year at LSU, when he broke out and had a record-breaking season. It's worth noting that Pickett and Burrow's season aren't even comparable, though. I mean, Burrows does blow Pickett's year out of the water. Most analysts have Kenny Pickett as a top 32 guy in the draft, but in the back half. But it doesn't really matter with the premium put on quarterbacks. He'll go higher than he should, just like every quarterback has for years. It's unlikely Pickett goes top 3. The Lions and Texans are in deep rebuilds, and they may not take a quarterback. The Jets and Giants claim to be dialed in on their previous first-round picks, but no matter how disappointing Zach Wilson and Daniel Jones are, they keep sticking with them. That leaves the first potential landing spot at number 6 to the Panthers. It's relatively warm in Carolina. Matt Rule desperately needs a quarterback, and Pickett may be the Hail Mary to save his job. The Falcons at number 8 makes sense, but they could also be in a deep rebuild and want to wait. But after trading Matt Ryan, Arthur Smith might quickly want to find his next QB. Seattle at 9 is a possibility, but it reportedly really likes Drew Lock, although I don't buy it. Washington at 11 and Minnesota at 12 are both in play despite having started quarterbacks, but everybody knows that Carson Wentz and Kirk Cousins probably won't be there next year. The Eagles have picks 15, 16, and 19, and it's really hard to know if Philadelphia is interested in moving on from Jalen Hurts, but if it is, Pickett is an option. New Orleans at 18 may take a look at Pickett if he's still there. Finally, the selection that I don't see Pickett actually getting past is 20 to the Steelers. Pickett played at Pittsburgh, he fits the Mike Tomlin mold, and he may be a perfect fit in the Steel City. I think there are a lot of good reasons to be skeptical about Kenny Pickett, but I think the biggest one to me is overall it just seems like he has a lower ceiling compared to the other guys in the draft. Personally, especially with where he's expected to go, he wouldn't be a guy that I would draft. I just don't see him turning into one of those perennial superstars like I think a guy like Malik Willis could potentially turn into. Now, he might be the most pro-ready in the draft, but in the NFL, you kind of have to just shoot for the stars. The small hand thing just seems very overblown in general. I get that they are a bit smaller than you would hope, and history certainly isn't on his side, but when you watch Kenny Pickett's film, it really doesn't show up, and it doesn't actually end up mattering. Like, if there were parts in his film where maybe the ball slips out of his hands or it looks like, it's wobbly coming out because of a bad grip, then at that point it would be something good to be concerned with. But the fact that it, 1, doesn't show up in film, and 2, he's been playing in the cold his entire life, just means that it's really something that shouldn't matter. What I do think matters, however, is his age. I wouldn't want a guy that turns 24 before the regular season even starts as a rookie. He should be a lot more developed than he actually is, and instead you're getting this guy who's a good quarterback and the most pro-ready, but he's still 24. How much more is he going to be able to grow? And that kind of goes back to the low ceiling thing. In terms of him being a one-year wonder, I'm not overall worried about that either. We saw it with Joe Burrow, and it obviously worked out for him. I don't think it's going to work out as well for Kenny Pickett, but if there's going to be one thing that scares me off from Kenny Pickett, it's not going to be that he was a one-year wonder. We've seen plenty of guys come into the pros that only had one good season in college, so that certainly shouldn't scare off any teams. But if you watch the film from last year, he was a fantastic player, and that's really all that should matter. The best fit is somewhere where I definitely don't see him ending up, and that is in Pittsburgh. I think without a doubt, the Steelers are the number one place for him. For starters, he obviously gets to stay home. He gets to stay in Pittsburgh. He's been playing at Pitt for years, so being able to stay would be huge for him. He'd already know the area. He'd be, kind of like a hometown hero like we saw with James Conner. Everybody already loved him in Pittsburgh. They would continue to love him. So I think it'd be a great fit for Kenny Pickett, even though it's outside in the cold. That kind of worries people with the small hands. I don't think that's a big issue. So I think Pittsburgh would be a perfect spot for him. When I watch him play, I can kind of see a little bit of how, that Mike Tomlin offense would work with him. So I think that would overall be the best fit. And the worst fit, well, I think it's going to be the worst fit for most quarterbacks, and that's the Texans. And that's really just because they're a disaster. I think Kenny Pickett's a guy that is going to need the right development and is going to need the right coaches around him more so than some of the other guys in the class. So for him, he needs to go in the right spot that believes him and can put him in the right position to succeed, because I think you're going to need to surround him with the right players. And I have no faith that the Texans are going to be even able to surround him around anybody that's going to help his development. Which leads me to what I think is actually going to happen. If I had to put money down right now and tell you where I think Kenny Pickett's going to end up, what I think is going to happen, that's Kenny Pickett going to the Falcons. It makes the most sense when you really look at it. They just traded traded away Matt Ryan. They really need a quarterback. Kenny Pickett is the perfect guy that can kind of swoop in. I think he'd fit well into that Arthur Smith type offense. I think it'd be a great fit for the Falcons just in general. Plus, they play in a dome. If you are worried about Kenny Pickett playing in the cold weather, if you're worried about the small hands thing, you can have him play about half of his games in a dome if you get him to Atlanta. Regardless, I can't wait to see where Kenny Pickett does end up. I think it's going to be Atlanta, but honestly, it's the NFL draft. Who knows?